Please welcome on this very stage. She's an old friend of mine. We met for, I don't know, decades. Because she is so bright, she had several positions, and now she is running the German Startup Association, and her actual job is to kick the politicians to do their job, to do good things that a lot of startups would live just very nicely in Germany. Please give a very big hand for Verena Pausder, head of the German Startup Association. And ladies and gentlemen, she will discuss with the French Minister of Digital and AI. Please give a very big hand for Clara Chappaz. I love this. And ladies and gentlemen, we know in some of these programs we had addressed that the EU Commissioner will be on this very stage. But as you know, in politics, things are happening, and she's very sorry that she can't make it today, but she said, I'll make up for it. I know you're waiting for me, but I send you somebody who's better and smarter than me, actually, because he's running the show, ladies and gentlemen. Please give a very big hand for Dr. Andreas Schwarz, the head of her cabinet. And ladies and gentlemen, the show will be hosted by a guy. Everybody who is in tech knows him. Everybody who is in tech knows him because he is just brilliant. And we love his analysis. Please give a big hand for TechCrunch's Mike Butcher. Thank you. Have fun.
Hello. Hello, everybody. Mike Butcher, tech journalist based in London, and very, very great to be here at GITEX in Berlin, GITEX Europe. I've been moderating panels at Dubai as well, and I'll be doing several today, so please follow me on social media at Mike Butcher. And it's my pleasure to have a wonderful panel. Let me introduce them. We have the Chief of the Cabinet for the EU and Innovation Startups, Andreas Schwarz. Verena, of course, from Chair of Board of the Startup Verband in Germany. And of course, Clara Chappaz, who is France's Minister for Digital Media and AI. Europe keeps producing world-class innovation, but very few of its startups are competing globally. According to the latest figures, 60% of global scale-ups are based in the US, and only 8% are based in the EU. Of course, those figures don't necessarily include the UK, where many European companies are also based. But the figures are not amazing. They're not great. And there's obviously structural issues in the EU, and in Europe generally. But can we surmount these issues? There are many initiatives going on right now, almost too many to count, hilariously. And it was so interesting to hear that France and Germany are collaborating so deeply on this subject. So perhaps, Clara, if I could turn to you first. There are many initiatives. There are both at governmental level, nation-state level, and at the EU level. Do you think they're going to be enough to address these issues?
Okay, thanks. Really happy we can have this conversation all around. We were joking before I start, and I'll answer your question. We were joking with Verena that we didn't get the memos that this event is so cool, and the vibe is like so particular. So it's extremely exciting for us to be here today. I mean, you said it very clearly. Everything that had to be written about where we stand when it comes to competitiveness and the lack of competitiveness in Europe and why we have such results has been very well written, especially by Draghi, who built that report and wrote that report a few months ago now. And it's interesting because every time I go to this conference, I hear like, oh, Draghi said this and Draghi said that, and we're thankful for Draghi to have done such an amazing work, really pinpointing where we need to, what are the root causes for where we stand and what we need to do now. But I think what is even more exciting, and I come from the private sector, so I like to see when things actually get done, not just written off, is that I can assure you that the geopolitical context we've been, if we needed that, has completely helped us to push much faster in this direction of building true Europe competitiveness. And this is not just like reports, this is really happening as we speak. And the fact that I'm here today to meet my counterpart is an extremely important sign. The fact that our president, Emmanuel Macron, and Chancellor Merz really joined and combined forces to say, hey, this is how we're going to approach now as a French-German relationship, and that technology and innovation is obviously one of the key things in this agenda, is extremely important because, as you said, we've made a lot of progress, countries to really build on when it comes to innovation. You've done an amazing job here in Germany. In France, we've been building for 8 years now with Emmanuel Macron a very vivid startup ecosystem, especially true for AI. We have companies that you probably all know about, like Mistral AI or Hugging Face, who are really like on the storefront of innovation. We had some of the best universities. I think seven middle fields come from France. And the research and talents we have in research when it comes to math especially give us an edge. We have access to this green energy that gives us very competitive advantage to build powerful data center to power this technology. But what we need to address now, that we're addressing now, is it's not only about the national efforts.
Right.
It can only be a European game if we want to win this game.
Right.
And every time you talk to founders, and all of them are here, gathered here today, we are 450 million Europeans. And sometimes we forget that. There are more people on Facebook in Europe than there are in the US. This is our strength. We're a huge market, but if we want to really unlock the potential of the market, what we're doing today, which is more harmonization, simplification, not deregulation. I think it's important to say, like, some of the regulation is obviously here to stay because the objectives are very good, but the way we implement this regulation, the way that you often have to 27 different countries to implement the same piece of regulation, this is the past, and the future is more harmonization, simplification, more investment, also harmonization, like making sure we combine capital markets.
I see.
All of that is happening as we speak.
Right. Yes. Well, we're going to we're going to hear a little bit more from Andreas shortly about that. But turning to you, Verena, you've been deeply involved in the European technology scene in Germany as well. We've met each other many times in the past, and as a journalist, I'm covering the ecosystem. I mean, and Germany's actually doing pretty well. I noticed that there were over 700 new startups founded in Germany last year, in the third quarter last year, the highest numbers since the boom of 2021, and there are a number of different initiatives. The issue, though, is still very structural and also certainly in regulation, but also in capital, isn't there? And do you think that Germany is able to step up in terms of the sheer amount of capital that's available to startups, both in the US and as we've been increasingly hearing about in MENA, the Middle East, and the UAE?
Yeah, that's, I think, exactly the decisive point, because, Mike, we have tripled our venture capital investments since 2015. We had 45 billion venture capital in Europe's ecosystem in 2023, but OpenAI alone got 40 billion. So it is great we tripled, but we're still far behind, and you can see that over 60% of our companies from the stage of Series B belong to US investors, because our growth funds are too small. And there have been great initiatives like Plan TB in France, the European Tech Champion Initiative, and also here in Germany, WIN, which are trying to activate institutional private capital, so pension fund, insurance capital, to allocate their money into innovation and venture capital. And that's desperately needed, because otherwise we build like a ramp for the world here in Europe. And as soon as the companies have kind of got a certain stage and they're really too good to fail, they don't belong to us anymore. McKinsey came up with figures that 400 billion in value creation went from Europe to the NASDAQ in the last 10 years. And so I think capital market union, a strong EU single market, an exit market in Europe to close the circle is absolutely crucial. Otherwise, we will be very good at founding companies here, but we will fail at scaling them.
Right, so scale. I'm certainly bringing you in just a moment, but if I can turn to Andreas, you're hearing about some of the issues, and let me just throw another statistic at you. Between 2008 and 2021, 30% of the unicorns founded in Europe relocated to the United States. So the problem is still pretty insurmountable. So what, at an EU level, and obviously you're here as a spokesperson, what do you think are the strongest initiatives at the EU level to address startups and innovation right now?
Yes, thank you very much. Some of the initiatives have already mentioned. We have a fragmented internal market, which we need to address. We have too much regulatory burden, so simplification. But let me maybe mention 3 initiatives that we plan to come forward with next week when we present the startup and scale-up strategy of the European Commission. The first one is we want to create a so-called 28th regime for companies, meaning to have a single set of rules for innovative companies, including startups, to operate within the internal market, addressing issues like taxation, labor, and so on. Have the companies founded very quickly so that they can operate very quickly within the entire internal market. A second initiative is the creation of a scale-up fund for Europe. As has already been mentioned, we are very good in producing startups, but we fail to scale them. And the problems are, of course, manifold, as already mentioned. But there is, we feel, private capital that is now willing to engage. We are about to set up such a fund, but the important thing is it needs to be market-based and privately managed. So we do not believe that the public sector can solve the scale-up problem with funding. It needs to be the private sector. And the fund we are about to create is going to be co-funded by the Commission and the private sector, but managed by the private sector with a dual objective: keep scale-up companies in Europe, let them grow in Europe, keep technologies in Europe, but also be profitable.
As a journalist, I have to ask you, are you going to give us a preview about how big that fund will be?
Well, that is to be discussed, but we are planning to create the biggest European venture capital fund that exists.
Okay, well, breaking news, we'll hear it soon, I hope. In the closing minutes of this panel, unfortunately truncated, but Clara, what do you think? You're excited about the fund? Do you think that's going to be a magic bullet?
Yeah, I'm happy to talk a bit about this financing issue, and also want to say there's one thing we haven't addressed, and I'll come back to that in a minute, is clients. Because it's great to have talents, it's great to have them start companies, it's great to fund them, but if they don't find clients at scale, they're never going to scale up. And I'll come back to that in a minute. But on the financing question, I think something very important that sometimes we forget is we have the money. We do have the money as Europeans. This money is just sleeping. And when the financial crisis hit back in 2008, late 2000s, we set ourselves rules that made it so strict for private investors to invest in innovative funds that we're now paying this price. And we set for ourselves rules that not everyone actually set for themselves. And that's where I think the lack of competitiveness comes from, especially not the one who actually started this crisis. And now I think it's time for us to address this issue and bring together, as you said, capital market union, bring together private money to fund those companies, because this is definitely not, and I completely agree, something we can solve just as governments. It needs to be, for it to be sustainable, it needs to be privately pushed forward, and that's what we've done through the leadership of President Emmanuel Macron in France with TB initiative that you mentioned, just telling pension funds, banks, institutional investors, let's go invest in those companies, because if you do not, the people who are going to do it, the pension funds, Canadian pension funds, US pension funds, Asian pension funds, they are just getting money back for their retirees.
Right.
And guess what? We also need that. So I think we're on the verge of breaking that problem, but this is not enough, and that's where I wanted to add on clients, because this is the only other, probably the second biggest topic we need to address is how do we make sure that all our companies end up finding clients here in Europe, because we're a huge market. But as long as we are still going to be in this mindset where 80% of our tech purchase, administrations, but also private companies, are going through American companies, how do you want to grow those companies if you
Right.
don't give them any money, if you don't give them
Yes.
any market? And
Yeah.
this is something that we also need to address. You know, we talk a lot about defense and European preference for defense.
Yes.
Tech is very critical. It's our infrastructure. If we
Well-
don't switch this mindset, we are so vulnerable and we are missing big economic
Yes, well, I'm glad you
opportunities.
said defence, because certainly defence I've been noticing in Munich is taking off as a big sector, absolutely. And Germany's extremely strong at that right now. We've obviously got a war on the borders of Europe. Out of all of these initiatives, there's employee stock option reform, the EU Inc. 28th regime initiative, harmonizing tax rules for remote workers that Germany, I know, has just done, visa strategy. Do you think that it's a matter of all of these initiatives at once, or are you thinking that one should be emphasized over another?
No, all at once. We've lost so much time, and I think now is Europe's moment to really get their act together and to say, how can we make talent acquisition quicker? How can we allocate the capital we have into innovation? How can we get rid of bureaucracy, especially within Europe, so that talent and capital can move freely within the European states? And it might be a bit counterintuitive, how can we make our regulation that we have strong? Because obviously, competition policy is startup policy. You need fair markets and you need open access to data and platforms. And so rigorously enforcing the Digital Market Act should also be on top of the agenda.
Right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, unfortunately we're out of time, but I hope you appreciate that I came in my Berlin jacket today in keeping with the event. But please, now a round of applause for Andreas Schwartz, Verena Pausder and Clara Chappaz.